Aren't we supposed to be having sex right now if we've, been dating for XYZ, or if he bought me dinner, or if she's being nice to me? Like, there's this sense that sex is this place that we're supposed to enter into, rather than treating it as holy. Hello, friends, and welcome to the Squeaky's Cauldron podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Evergreen. This is a more intimate, familiar place for me to just sit with you in your ears and talk about magic and love. Sounds pretty good, eh? Today, specifically, I want to talk about the sanctity of sex. This is a topic that I am not afraid to admit that I feel pretty nervous talking about, because I think that it is maybe a bit counter to a lot of what is in the mainstream culture at the moment. Honestly, there's a lot of stuff in the mainstream culture at the moment that I think is probably pretty unhealthy. And I want to talk about that more. I want to, as I say, use my voice to talk about the things. Man, I've got my hands in my lap here and they are just clenched together. So let's loosen that up a little bit and just kind of try to drop into the space a bit. What do I mean when I say the sanctity of sex? Well, first, let's look at the word sanctity. Sanctuary. Something that is holy. Something that should be respected. And that's really what it comes down to a lot, is that I believe that sex should be respected. It is a space where two people, or more than two people, can come together and experience union with one another, with themselves, and with God. It is a space that can be absolutely religious. And I think that when we approach sex with this understanding, with this perspective of it, then that is, I'm not a huge fan of the word should, but that is what sex should be. So often, and I've done this, my friend, I've done this so much. I think there's a tendency to approach sex as just a purely physical thing, or a way to get a pretty basic emotional need met, or with a sense of obligation, or this idea that, this is the thing that's supposed to happen. I'm supposed to want to have sex with this person. I'm supposed to deliver something to this person, to this relationship. Aren't we supposed to be having sex right now if we've, been dating for XYZ, or if he bought me dinner, or if she's being nice to me? Like, there's this sense that sex is this place that we're supposed to enter into, rather than treating it as holy, as a place of worship and devotion to one another, to self, and to God. I think the result of not treating sex as sanctified, as holy, is that we have, as a culture in the West, grown so far apart from one another and from ourselves. Now, sex is used so much as a tool of I'm going to introduce a new word here. So Heisem and I were talking about manipulation, and maybe I'll cover that on a different episode, but I don't believe that manipulation across the board is a bad thing. I think it's something that we do all the time. But the word that we came up with to maybe take the place of manipulation is manipulation. It is manipulation with a sense of malice behind it. It's trying to control something or some situation where there's an intention to cause pain of some kind, whether that's conscious or not. Sex, it has been turned into a tool of manipulation. It's used by the media to try to get us to buy things, obviously. It's used within relationships to try to control another person, to make them feel a certain way, or to get something from them. And there's a lot to be said about the sexual liberation that started back in the 60s, I want to say. We can talk about sex more freely to a point. We are able to experiment more. We have more access to education. We have more access to sex toys, which are great. I fucking love sex toys, so don't take those away from me. And at the same time, we've taken the body and the body's experiences and the body's desires and the body's longings and the fulfillment of these momentary lust experiences. We've taken that and divorced it so much from the soul. When you have a body that's divorced from the soul, you have essentially a base animal. Of course, if we go into our relationships with a perspective from that place of being a base animal that just needs to get these urges fulfilled, then it's going to wreak havoc on our relationships. It's going to make our relationships that much more difficult to sustain. It undermines a sense of connection between people, and it creates a environment in which sex becomes unsafe. And when sex becomes unsafe, we then have other things that pop up. We have libido that gets crushed under the sense of being unsafe. So for myself, I know that I continue to navigate this because I've had a lot of sexual trauma in my past, both big T and little t, and unpicking that in my nervous system, unpicking that in my perspective and the way that I experience my sexual desires and experience my libido and that level of, do I actually feel sexy right now or not? Like, there's been a massive impact there. When we treat sex as holy, when we treat that union as a place of sanctity, as a place of sanctuary, when we can approach our partner or partners as divine, sovereign beings who channel spirit through them, and we orient towards tapping into the sexual energy, then sex becomes safe again. Not just safe, but sex becomes holy again. Sex becomes a ritual, a rite. And I mean rite, R-I-T-E, obviously. My view on sexual energy is that it is the bedrock of our power. It is the source of everything, really. If I'm gonna be honest, I believe it is the source of everything. And here's what I mean by that. Our universe is made up of an absolutely minuscule amount of actual physical matter. The amount of actual physical matter that exists on Earth could be fit into something the size of about a sugar cube. Everything in between that very, very small bit of actual physical matter is space. But it's not just space, because if it was just space, then it would just be space and there would be like teeny tiny bits of matter and just floating around. No, in between those bits of matter is tension. It is the tension between atoms. It is the tension between subatomic particles. It is the tension between human beings. It is the tension of gravity. There's this tension, this energy that causes things to fit together in a particular way, to come together and break apart and come together again. And we get this on the absolute subatomic level that then just kind of builds up into systems that create humans, that create families, that create communities, that create neighborhoods, that create cities, that create countries, that creates the world. That tension is the tension of creation, the tension of creativity, that which everything else is born from. Without that tension, which is the same as the dance of the lovers, without that tension, nothing could exist. From my perspective, or rather, not so much perspective necessarily, but the language that I use, the language that resonates to me, is that this energy, this creative energy, is the sexual energy, and sexual energy is the creative energy. So when I talk about sexual energy, I'm not talking about that base urge to go get your rocks off. I'm not talking about the urge to share a bed with someone so you feel a little bit less lonely. I'm talking about the dance between the sun and the moon. I'm talking about the dance between atoms. I'm talking about the energy that moves in and through everything, that holds us together, that propels us apart. It is that energy that we can tap into when we, in a variety of ways, but especially when we approach sex, the actual physical act of sex, and the process of getting into that space, the flirtation, the foreplay, all of this. That is the energy that we can tap into. And that is a basic source of power. And I mean basic as in like it's there at the bottom and everything else comes from it. When we don't approach sex in this way, when we approach it in a way that is just looking for the physical satisfaction of something, we miss out on all of the potentiality within that space of the sexual energy, within that space of creation. We miss out on the potentiality of connecting with God through seeing God in our partner and God in ourselves. I've had experiences where when making love with my partner, I feel God come into me and I see God come into him. And it is something so very different than when I am orienting simply towards physical satisfaction. That moment when I truly see the divine in the other and see them seeing the divine in me, that is healing. That can do so much for the nervous system, for unpicking trauma, for getting back to a place of peace and calm and connection with the universe, with all of these energies. It is a transformative experience. This idea that you can go out and have sex with whoever you want, whenever you want, or whoever will have you, rather, whenever you have the opportunity, and that it doesn't have any kind of like lasting emotional or spiritual impact on you, I think that is just pure bullshit. And I think on a certain level, it might be kind of evil, because that approach disconnects one from spirit, from yourself. It disconnects you from these bigger experiences, these bigger energies that you have the ability to access if given, the focus, the time, the energy, the intention to access them. What is the definition of evil? I mean, that's a good question, right? Perhaps we could say that the definition of evil is something that moves one away from an expression of life. I don't think that death itself is evil, but maybe actively trying to get people to die to themselves, that could be evil. Or to get the world to die to itself, that could be evil. Okay, we're going here, Sarah. Yeah, I'm feeling a little sweaty and again clenching my hands, so let's loose those up. Because using words like this, I know can be triggering, can bring up a lot in people. It brings up a lot in myself. Evil, the word evil is awfully loaded, and I think that in the climate right now, with a lot of people, there is this desire to not touch those words at all, to cast them off as some vestigial, useless piece of old organized religion, and that there is no such thing as evil, that everything is good, that we could do, whatever we want, and there's some level of acceptance and approval for everything. I do agree with this to a point, and I also think that we need to have some fucking ground to stand on. Because if we don't have any ground to stand on, then we're gonna be wibbly wobbly weenies out in the world who never feel empowered to say, no, actually, that's fucked up. No, that's wrong. Don't do that. I don't agree with that. And we need to be able to say that. We need to be able to recognize that we don't have to be absolutely permissive about everything, while at the same time recognizing that inherently every human being is good. Every human being at their core, at your core, at my core, we have that flickery flame of spirit, we have that soul, we have that goodness, we have that beautiful, beautiful innocence that exists in each and every one of us, and that I have unconditional approval for, I have unconditional love for, and I have a deep, deep love for the way that you may feel the need to express a certain thing, while at the same time holding firm that certain kinds of expression are damaging. They're harmful. I don't think that we can get away from that. I don't think that we should get away from that. There are things that are not okay, and we have to be able to talk about them. Here's another thing, is that when we move away from this understanding that sex is sacred, we start to invite in other sexual expressions that can be harmful. And this ranges. So like I've said, promiscuity, I think, is definitely harmful. And that's kind of on the mid-range of harm that you can find in sexual expression. And it goes all the way out to rape and child molestation. I think that if we could approach sex, if we just as a culture viewed sex as sacred and beautiful and holy, something not to be ashamed about, something that wasn't taboo, something that we needed to talk about, but that still retained that sanctity, then we can start to address the issues of child molestation and sexual abuse. Like, I do strongly believe that these are connected to the way that sex is shamed, and the way that sex has been shamed is strongly connected to this kind of what's the word I'm looking for? This pendulum that has swung in the other direction that says, no, sex isn't sacred at all. Let's go out and fuck whoever we want. Like, these things are all connected. I do not believe that the sexual liberation has had a positive impact on the rate of sexual abuse and sexual abuse with children. I think quite the opposite, in fact. So what I am calling for is for a return to sanctity, a return to holiness, a return to this understanding that sex is beautiful, not just as a thing that we can do with anyone and everyone, but to understand that when you are going into this place where you are getting intimate with your partner or partners, that we can approach it. You can approach it with deep, deep understanding that you're going into a very intimate space. And this is a space that has an impact on your heart, on your soul, on your life. There is no such thing as casual sex at all. You are sharing something deeply monumentous with another human being. Even if it's someone that you never see again, they have shared part of you and you have shared part of them. They are part of you and you are part of them from that point forward. And there are ways that we can unpick these things and clear up like nasty energy that we may have picked up from past lovers. And the truth is that you'll never get rid of it completely. That's an experience that left a mark. Okay, I feel like I've proselytized enough for today. I'll leave you with sex is sacred. Approach it the same way that you would approach a pulpit at a church or a mountain stream if nature is your church. Approach it the same way that you would approach anything that puts you in a state of awe and wonder. Because that is the true nature of sex. It is a place, it is an experience, it is a space of awe and wonder. All right, my friend. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening. If you're interested in other stuff I do, check out the show notes. Until next time, as always, take care of yourself and use your voice.